Marcus couldn't believe his eyes could changing his Wi-Fi password really bring the cops to his doorstep at midnight. Yet, there they stood, two officers, their flashlights slicing through the darkness, eyeing him like he'd just pulled off the heist of the century. Behind them, Karen, his nosy next-door neighbor, stood with her arms crossed, her face flushed with righteous fury, smirking as if she'd just cracked the biggest cybercrime case in history. "Sir, we've got a complaint about unauthorized hacking," one officer muttered, barely stifling a yawn. "Your neighbor here says you illegally accessed her Wi-Fi and messed with her internet connection." Can you imagine the audacity? Marcus blinked once, twice, then burst out laughing. How could this be real? This had to be some kind of prank, right? But Karen's glare was deadly serious. Her oversized sunglasses perched ridiculously on her head despite the pitch-black night. "Ma'am," Marcus said, rubbing his temples in disbelief, "are you seriously accusing me of hacking your Wi-Fi? The Wi-Fi I pay for in my own house?" Karen snapped back. "Yes. I don't know how you did it, but you did. My son and I were using it just fine for months, and then boom, no internet. And the only thing that changed? You messed with it." Was she actually admitting this in front of the cops? Marcus's brain nearly short-circuited. Did she just confess to mooching off his Wi-Fi right there, bold as brass, in front of two police officers? The younger officer sighed, looking like he was questioning every choice that led him to this moment. "Sir, can you explain what happened?" he asked, his voice dripping with exhaustion. Marcus let out a long breath, trying to keep his cool. "Here's the deal, officers. My internet was crawling slower than molasses. So, I checked my router settings, and guess what? There were a bunch of devices connected that weren't mine. All I did was change my password. That's it. End of story." Karen gasped like he'd just admitted to setting her house on fire. "Exactly," she shrieked. "You cut off our access without warning. That's illegal, isn't it?" Marcus stared at the officers, waiting for them to shut this nonsense down. Were they really going to let her carry on like this? Instead, they exchanged a weary glance, probably debating who had to deal with this circus. The older officer finally turned to Karen, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Ma'am, your neighbor has every right to change his password. It's his internet, not yours." Karen's face twisted into something downright ugly, her lips pursing in defiance. "No, you don't get it. This is a community. We share things around here. And now my poor son can't even do his homework." Marcus nearly choked on his own spit. "Homework? Are you kidding me? Your son spends all night yelling into his gaming headset, trash-talking strangers online like it's his job," Karen gasped again, clutching her chest as if Marcus had just slandered royalty. "How dare you?" she screeched, her voice echoing into the night. By now, even the cops looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, maybe busting an actual crime instead of this neighborhood drama. The younger officer, barely hiding his annoyance, gave Marcus a tired look. "Sir, do you want to press charges?" Marcus froze, utterly baffled. "Press charges? Against her?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. The officer scratched the back of his head almost sheepishly. "Well, technically, if she's been using your internet without permission, that could be considered theft." Karen's eyes widened to the size of saucers. "What?" she yelped, her bravado crumbling. Marcus took a deep breath, weighing his options. Oh, how tempting it was to let her squirm. But he had a better idea, one that might just let him get some peace. "No, officers, I don't want to press charges. I just want to go back to bed." The officers nodded, visibly relieved, and turned to Karen with a stern warning. "Ma'am, stop using your neighbor's Wi-Fi without permission. If you've got an issue, call your service provider. Have a good night." Karen, still sputtering with rage, stormed off into the darkness, but not before jabbing a trembling finger at Marcus. "This isn't over," she hissed. Marcus shut the door, muttering under his breath. "Oh, I know it's not. The next morning, Marcus woke to a fresh nightmare. Could this day get any worse? His mailbox was stuffed to the brim with angry handwritten notes from Karen, each one more over the top than the last. One read, "Shame on you for destroying our community spirit." Another declared, "God sees what you did, Marcus." But the real kicker? A fake petition titled, "Make Marcus Give Back the Wi-Fi," with Karen's name scrawled a dozen times in different handwriting like she thought she could fool anyone. Was she serious with this? Then came the neighborhood gossip spreading faster than wildfire. At the local coffee shop, two elderly women huddled behind their cups, whispering as Marcus walked by. "That's him," one muttered. "The hacker." At the grocery store, a dad yanked his kid away from Marcus like he was some kind of dangerous criminal. Even the mailman shot him a pitying look, as if to say, "Hang in there, buddy." Marcus couldn't believe it had Karen actually convinced half the neighborhood that he was some evil tech wizard who'd locked them out of their precious Wi-Fi. How did this become his life? Things took an even stranger turn that night. While double-checking his router's security settings because who could trust anything anymore, Marcus noticed something downright bizarre. A device was still connected to his network, but it wasn't Karen's. How was that even possible? He'd reset the password twice, locked it down tight. His heart started pounding. Someone was inside his network. Curious but nervous, he traced the device's activity. This wasn't just someone streaming movies or scrolling social media. They were doing something shady, accessing files, logins, transactions. What in the world was going on? Then he saw it, the IP address. His stomach dropped like a stone. The location wasn't from his house, it was coming from Karen's. Someone in her house wasn't just stealing his Wi-Fi. They were up to something big, something dangerous. At first, he thought it might be a glitch, but the logs didn't lie. His curiosity morphed into suspicion. He knew Karen was a pain in the neck, but this was on a whole other level. This wasn't just her usual entitlement, this was illegal. He had to get to the bottom of this, and fast. Marcus hatched a plan, his mind racing with determination. He reopened his Wi-Fi network but gave it a sneaky new name, something generic like Free Public Wi-Fi. Who could resist that bait? Then he set up a tracking program to monitor every move the mystery device made. If someone from Karen's house connected, he'd know instantly. It took less than 10 minutes for the device to pop up again, and what he saw made his jaw drop. They weren't just browsing cat videos, they were accessing bank accounts, cryptocurrency wallets, the works. This wasn't freeloading, this was full-on hacking. How deep did this go? His stomach twisted with dread. If someone in Karen's house was running illegal operations through his network, this could spell serious trouble. What if the authorities traced it back to him? He needed hard proof, and he needed it now. He watched as the device connected to a private server far beyond casual internet use. Whoever was behind this was no amateur. They knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus realized he couldn't tackle this alone. Confronting Karen was the next step, but he had to be smart about it. Marching over with wild accusations would only make her double down, twist the story to paint herself as the victim. Oh, he could already hear her whining. So, he printed out the connection logs, timestamps, and a detailed report of the mystery device's activity. If Karen wanted to scream at him again, fine, he'd be ready with evidence. He marched to her door, his heart pounding, and knocked. Karen answered with her usual sneer. "Oh, look who it is. Come to apologize for ruining my life?" Marcus held up the papers, his voice steady. "We need to talk, Karen." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "What now? Did I breathe too loudly? Did my lawn offend you?" Marcus took a deep breath, bracing himself. "Someone in your house is hacking accounts using my Wi-Fi." Karen blinked, her face flickering with genuine confusion. "What are you even talking about?" She snapped, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Marcus handed her the papers. These logs show a device connecting from your house. It's accessing financial data, personal logins. This isn't just about Wi-Fi anymore, Karen. This is serious. Karen skimmed the pages, her frown deepening, then scoffed. This is ridiculous. I don't even know what half of this tech jargon means. Marcus studied her closely. Was she telling the truth? She didn't seem to be faking her confusion, which meant someone else in her house was behind this. Suddenly, as if a light bulb went off, Karen's expression shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and she spun toward the stairs. Brad! She bellowed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Oh, this was about to get good. Heavy footsteps thundered from upstairs, and a teenage boy appeared at the top of the staircase. Brad, Karen's son, looked about 17, his headphones dangling around his neck, clutching a laptop so tightly his knuckles were white. Karen thrust the papers at him. Explain this. Bradley, she demanded, her voice quivering with anger. Brad's face drained of color, his eyes wide with panic. I don't know what that is, he stammered, but his voice betrayed him. Karen's nostrils flared. Marcus says someone in this house has been using his Wi-Fi to hack. She squinted at the papers, struggling with the terminology. Brad swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. That's stupid. I don't know anything about that. But Marcus caught the way Brad's eyes darted toward the front door, the way he gripped that laptop like it was his lifeline. This kid was nervous, way too nervous. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. Bradley, give me that laptop, now. Brad took a step back, clutching it tighter. Mom, no. Karen's tone turned icy. I said now. Panic flashed across Brad's face. It's mine. You can't just... But Karen was too quick. She lunged forward, snatching the laptop from his hands in one swift move. Brad looked like he might faint, his knees practically buckling as Karen stormed down the stairs, clutching the device like it held the secrets of the universe. Marcus braced himself, his heart racing. What was she about to find? Karen flipped the laptop open, her lips pursed in determination. All right, let's see what's so important that you... She stopped dead, her face twisting into a mask of pure shock. Brad edged toward the stairs, his voice trembling. Mom, please, I can explain. Karen's eyes snapped up, and for the first time since Marcus had known her, she looked truly terrified. What is this? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, his curiosity getting the better of him. The screen was a damning display. A list of stolen accounts, streaming services, online banking logins, credit card details, all under different usernames. Brad had been hacking people's private data. Marcus swore under his breath. He knew it was bad. But this was felony level bad. Karen turned slowly toward her son, her hands shaking. What have you been doing, Brad? She demanded, her voice cracking with fear. Brad backed up, stammering, It's not. It's nothing, okay? Karen's voice rose to a near scream. You stole people's accounts! Brad's panic turned defensive, his voice rising to match hers. It's not like that. It's just streaming accounts. People share those all the time. Marcus crossed his arms, his patience wearing thin. Oh, really? And what about the banking logins? The cryptocurrency wallets? You were stealing money, Brad. Karen looked like she might collapse, her face as pale as a ghost. Brad, they can trace this back to us, she gasped, clutching the table for support. Brad opened his mouth, then snapped it shut. He knew he was caught, had known it all along. For once, Karen was speechless, her bravado shattered. She dropped the laptop on the table like it was radioactive, whispering, Oh my God. Marcus nodded grimly. Yeah, that's what I said. Karen shook her head violently, as if she could will this nightmare away. No, this isn't happening. Then, in a flash, she whirled on Marcus, her voice shrill with desperation. This is your fault. You did something to make this happen. You've been out to get us since you moved in. Marcus stared at her dumbfounded. Are you serious right now? Karen pointed a trembling finger at Brad. "Tell me the truth, Brad. Tell me Marcus hacked your laptop." Brad's face twisted in exasperation. "Mom, what? No, that's not." Karen clapped her hands over her ears, refusing to hear it. "I don't want to hear it! We're fixing this! We're making this go away." Marcus let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Karen, this isn't a parking ticket. Your son's been committing actual crimes." Karen ignored him, pacing frantically like a caged animal. Then she spun toward Marcus, her eyes wild with a manic gleam. "You don't have to tell anyone, right? We can just pretend this never happened." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Karen's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "I can bake you something. I make amazing cookies." Marcus blinked, almost laughing at the absurdity. "I'm allergic to gluten, Karen." She clenched her fists, undeterred. "Fine, I'll pay you." Marcus exhaled sharply. "Lady, your son's committing cybercrimes. The police would have found out eventually." Karen's face contorted with fury. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" And then, as if fate had a flair for drama, a loud knock echoed from the front door. Brad froze, his face ghostly white. Karen's eyes darted to the door, her breath catching in her throat. Marcus folded his arms, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Well, that was quick." Karen's entire body tensed, her voice trembling. "You didn't," Marcus just grinned, savoring the moment. The knock came again, louder, more insistent, followed by a deep voice that sent a chill through the room. "This is the FBI. We need to speak with Bradley Smith." Karen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Brad looked like he might collapse, his knees buckling. Marcus, calm as ever, sipped his coffee, watching the chaos unfold. The room fell deathly silent, Karen's face pale as a sheet, Brad's hands twitching nervously at his sides. Was this really happening? The knock grew heavier, more impatient, the voice booming again. "This is the FBI. We need to speak with Bradley Smith." Karen's eyes darted between the door and her son, her mind clearly spiraling. Then, in a panic, she grabbed Brad's arm, hissing, "Go to your room." "Delete everything now." Brad yanked free, shaking his head frantically. "Mom, that's not how this works. They already know." Karen spun toward Marcus, her desperation morphing into raw anger. "You did this. You called them." Marcus raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Lady, your kid's been committing cybercrimes for who knows how long. All I did was stop him from using my Wi-Fi to do it." Karen's face twisted, but before she could unleash another tirade, the voice outside cut through. "Mrs. Smith, we know you're inside. Open the door, we have a warrant." Marcus whistled low. "A warrant? Oh, that's not good." Karen let out a high-pitched whimper, her hands shaking uncontrollably. In a move so unhinged it defied belief, Karen grabbed the laptop and hurled it at Marcus. "Take it! It's yours!" she screamed. Marcus caught it just before it hit the floor, staring at her in disbelief. "What?" Karen flailed her arms wildly. "They can't find it here! It's yours now! You planted it!" Marcus exhaled, his patience gone. "Are you seriously trying to frame me right now?" Karen's eyes were wild with panic. "You had access to our Wi-Fi. You could have done it. You're the hacker." Marcus shook his head, incredulous. "Karen, you just yelled delete everything 5 seconds ago." Brad groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Mom, stop, please." Karen grabbed her son's shoulders, shaking him. "Don't say another word. We deny everything." The knocking turned to pounding, the voice outside roaring. "Last warning. Open the door or we're coming in." Karen's breath hitched, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. Then, in a moment no one saw coming, she bolted toward the back of the house. Marcus blinked, stunned. Brad's jaw dropped. Before anyone could react, Karen dove through the backyard window, glass shattering everywhere, followed by a thud and a groan. Marcus peeked outside, jaw on the floor. There she was, tangled in her own garden gnome display, moaning in pain. "Oh my God," he muttered. "She actually did it." Brad slapped his forehead, muttering, "She's lost it." The front door burst open and FBI agents swarmed in, weapons drawn, moving with precision. Brad threw his hands up, looking like he might cry. One agent snatched the laptop from Marcus while another stared out the window at Karen, still groaning in the grass. We might need medics for that one," he said, shaking his head. Karen wailed, "I'm innocent!" The agent rolled his eyes. "Mrs. Smith, you just jumped out a window." "I panicked," she whined, flailing in the dirt. Marcus leaned against the wall, watching the scene unfold like a wild crime show. Brad was restrained, the FBI was scanning his laptop, and Karen was still moaning in her gnome pile. An agent turned to Marcus. "You reported the unauthorized network activity?" Marcus nodded, shrugging. "Yeah, didn't expect it to blow up like this." The agent flipped through a notebook. "You weren't the only one. We've been tracking Brad's fraud cases across multiple states." Marcus's eyes widened. "Multiple states?" Brad groaned miserably. Karen, still in the dirt, shouted, "He's just a kid! You can't arrest a child!" The agent sighed. "He's 18, ma'am. He's an adult." Karen let out a sob-screech combo. "But he didn't mean to." Brad sighed. "Mom, just stop." The agents turned back to Marcus. "Thanks for your help. This could have been worse if it went unchecked." Marcus shrugged. "I just wanted to change my Wi-Fi password." An agent chuckled. "Well, you might have saved a lot of folks from identity theft." Karen, still thrashing, pointed at Marcus. "He's the real hacker. He framed my baby." The agent sighed, exasperated. "Ma'am, we've got months of evidence on your son. We've been on this for weeks." Karen's mouth flapped open and shut, finally slumping in defeat. "This is so unfair." Brad sighed, defeated. "Can I just go to jail now?" The agents wrapped up, securing Brad's laptop and leading him out. Karen scrambled up, chasing them. "Wait, I'll get a lawyer." The door slammed shut, leaving silence. Marcus exhaled, looking around the wrecked house glass shards, Karen's complaint letters, and finally, peace. He walked home, locked his door, and for the first time, connected to his Wi-Fi without worry. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed Karen's house was empty. Brad faced felony charges, and Karen was spotted loading a moving truck, her face still furious. By noon, she was gone. As Marcus watered his plants, his neighbor George strolled by, nodding. "Heard Karen moved out." Marcus smirked. "Yep," George chuckled. "You won, huh?" Marcus breathed in the peaceful air. "Oh, I definitely won." Marcus leaned over Karen's shoulder, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. What was he about to see? The laptop screen glowed with a chilling list of stolen accounts, streaming services, online banking logins, credit card details, all neatly organized under different usernames. Brad, Karen's teenage son, had been hacking people's private data. Marcus swore under his breath, his mind reeling. He knew this was bad, but this was felony level. Lock you up and throw away the key bad. Karen turned slowly toward her son, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. "Brad, what have you been doing?" she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Brad stumbled backward, his face paling as if he'd seen a ghost. "It's not. It's nothing. Okay?" he stammered, but his shaking hands betrayed him. Karen's voice shot up, sharp and panicked. "You stole people's accounts?" she shrieked, her words echoing in the tense room. Brad's panic morphed into defiance, his voice rising to meet hers. "It's not like that, Mom. It's just streaming accounts. People share those all the time, don't they?" Marcus crossed his arms, his patience wearing thin. "Oh, yeah? And what about the banking logins, huh? The cryptocurrency wallets? You were stealing money, Brad." Karen swayed, her face draining of color until she looked like she might faint right there. "Brad, they can trace this back to us." She gasped, clutching the edge of the table. Brad opened his mouth, then snapped it shut, his silence screaming guilt. He knew he'd known this whole time. For the first time in forever, Karen was utterly speechless, her usual fire snuffed out. She dropped the laptop onto the table like it was a ticking bomb, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if saying it louder would make it real. Marcus sighed heavily, shaking his head. "Yeah, that's exactly what I said." Karen shook her head violently, as if she could shake the truth away. "No, no, no, this isn't happening. This can't be happening." Then, in a wild pivot, she whirled on Marcus, her voice shrill with desperation. "This is your fault. You did something to make this happen. You've been out to get us since the day you moved in, haven't you?" Marcus stared at her, his jaw practically on the floor. "Are you serious right now, Karen?" he asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Karen jabbed a shaking finger at Brad, her eyes blazing. "Tell me the truth, Brad. Tell me Marcus hacked your laptop." Brad's face twisted in frustration, his voice cracking. "Mom, what? No, that's not what happened." Karen clapped her hands over her ears, refusing to hear another word. "I don't want to hear it. We're fixing this, Brad. We're going to make this go away." Marcus let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "Karen, this isn't some parking ticket you can sweet-talk your way out of. Your son's been committing actual crimes." Karen ignored him, pacing the room like a caged animal, her footsteps frantic against the hardwood floor. Then she spun toward Marcus, her eyes gleaming with a manic intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "You don't have to tell anyone, right? We can just pretend this never happened, can't we?" Marcus's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly touched his hairline. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me!" Karen's voice dropped to a desperate conspiratorial whisper. "I can bake you something. I make the best cookies in the neighborhood." Marcus blinked, almost laughing at the absurdity. "I'm allergic to gluten, Karen," he said, shaking his head. She clenched her fists, undeterred, her desperation palpable. "Fine, I'll pay you. Name your price." Marcus exhaled sharply, his patience long gone. "Lady, your son is committing cybercrimes." "The police would have found out eventually, with or without me." Karen's face twisted into a mask of pure fury, her cheeks flushing red. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" She spat, her voice venomous. And then, as if the universe had a wicked sense of humor, a loud, ominous knock echoed from the front door, freezing everyone in their tracks. Brad went completely still, his eyes wide with terror. Karen's gaze darted to the door, her breath catching in her throat like a trapped animal. Marcus folded his arms, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Well, that was fast, wasn't it?" Karen's entire body tensed, her voice trembling with accusation. "You didn't." Marcus just smirked, savoring the moment. The knock came again, louder, more insistent, and then a deep, authoritative voice boomed through the door, sending a jolt through the room. "This is the FBI. We need to speak with Bradley Smith." Karen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. Brad looked like he was about to collapse, his knees buckling under the weight of his fear. Marcus, calm as ever, sipped his coffee, watching the chaos unfold like a scene from a blockbuster movie. The room fell into a deathly silence, Karen's face pale as a sheet, Brad's hands twitching nervously at his sides. Was this really happening? The knock grew heavier, more impatient, the voice outside repeating with a tone that brooked no argument. "This is the FBI. We need to speak with Bradley Smith." Karen's eyes darted between the door and her son, her mind visibly spiraling into chaos. Then, in a sudden burst of panic, she lunged forward and grabbed Brad's arm, hissing in a frantic whisper, "Go to your room. Delete everything now." Brad yanked his arm free, shaking his head wildly. "Mom, that's not how this works. They already know everything." Karen spun toward Marcus, her fear morphing into raw, desperate anger. "You did this. You called them, didn't you? She screamed, her voice cracking. Marcus raised an eyebrow, unfazed by her outburst. Lady, your kid's been committing cybercrimes for who knows how long. All I did was stop him from using my Wi-Fi to do it. Karen's face contorted with rage, but before she could unleash another tirade, the voice outside cut through like a blade. Miss S. Smith, we know you're inside. Open the door now, we have a warrant. Marcus let out a low whistle, his eyes gleaming with amusement. A warrant? Oh, that's bad news, Karen. She let out a high-pitched noise, a mix of a shriek and a whimper, her hands shaking uncontrollably, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Then, in a move so utterly deranged it defied comprehension, Karen grabbed the laptop off the table and hurled it at Marcus with all her might. Take it! It's yours! She screamed, her voice wild with panic. Marcus barely caught it before it crashed to the floor, staring at her in utter disbelief. What in the world? He exclaimed, his voice laced with incredulity. Karen flailed her arms like a madwoman. They can't find it here. It's yours now you planted it. Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to wrap his head around the depths of her delusion. Are you actually trying to frame me right now, Karen? He asked, his tone dripping with exasperation. Her eyes were wild, her voice frantic. You had access to our Wi-Fi. You could have done it. You're the hacker. Marcus shook his head, incredulous. Karen, you literally just screamed delete everything 5 seconds ago. You're not fooling anyone, Brad groaned, burying his face in his hands, his voice muffled. Mom, stop please. Karen grabbed her son's shoulders, shaking him with a desperate intensity. Don't say another word, Brad. We deny everything. The knocking turned into relentless pounding, the voice outside roaring. Last warning! Open the door, or we're coming in. Karen's breath hitched, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Then, in a moment that shocked everyone, she bolted toward the back of the house, her footsteps frantic. Marcus blinked, stunned. Brad's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with disbelief. Before anyone could process it, Karen dove through the backyard window with a crash that echoed like a gunshot. Glass shattered everywhere, followed by a heavy thud and a pained groan. Marcus peeked outside, his jaw practically hitting the floor. There she was, sprawled in the grass, tangled in her own ridiculous garden gnome display, moaning in agony. Oh my God, he muttered, shaking his head. She actually did it. She jumped through a window. Brad slapped a hand to his forehead, muttering, She's completely lost her mind. Before Marcus could say another word, the front door burst open with a bang, and FBI agents swarmed inside, their weapons drawn, moving with swift, precise efficiency. Brad threw his hands up, his face crumpling like he was about to burst into tears. One agent snatched the laptop from Marcus's hands, while another peered out the window, staring in disbelief at Karen, still groaning in the grass. We might need medics for that one, the agent said, shaking his head in astonishment. Karen wailed, her voice carrying across the yard. I'm innocent. The agent nearest her rolled his eyes, his patience clearly gone. Miss S. Smith, you just jumped out a window. That's not exactly the move of an innocent person. I panicked. She whined, flailing in the dirt, her voice dripping with desperation. Marcus leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold like a live-action crime drama. Brad was being restrained, his wrists cuffed as he hung his head in defeat. The FBI agents were already scanning through his laptop, their faces grim as they uncovered more evidence. Karen, meanwhile, was still moaning in her gnome pile, her complaints growing weaker but no less dramatic. One of the agents finally turned to Marcus, his expression a mix of professionalism and exhaustion. You're the one who reported the unauthorized network activity, right? Marcus nodded, shrugging casually. Yeah, but I didn't expect it to escalate this fast. I mean, wow. The agent flipped through a small notebook, glancing at the data they'd already collected. You weren't the only one. Trust me. We've been tracking multiple fraud cases tied to Brad's activity. This guy's been hacking accounts across multiple states. Marcus's eyebrows shot up, his voice rising with shock. Wait, multiple states? Are you kidding me? Brad let out a miserable groan, his head dropping even lower. Oh, come on, he muttered, his voice barely audible. Karen, still sprawled in the dirt, suddenly shouted, her voice hoarse but defiant. He's just a kid. You can't arrest a child. The agent closest to her side, rubbing his temple. He's 18, ma'am. He's legally an adult, and he's in big trouble. Karen let out a noise that was half sob, half screech, her voice breaking. But he didn't mean to. He's my baby. Brad sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. Mom, just stop talking, please. The agents ignored her theatrics, turning their attention back to Marcus. We appreciate your cooperation, sir. This could have gotten a lot worse if it had gone unchecked. Marcus shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Honestly, all I wanted was to change my Wi-Fi password. Who knew it'd turn into this? One of the agents chuckled, shaking his head. Well, you might have saved a lot of people from getting their identities stolen, so good call. Meanwhile, Karen was still thrashing in the dirt, pointing a dramatic, trembling finger at Marcus. He's the real hacker. He framed my baby, she wailed, her voice carrying across the yard. One of the agents exchanged a tired look with his partner, then turned to her with an exasperated sigh. Ma'am, we've got months' worth of evidence linked to your son's accounts. We've been investigating this for weeks, long before your neighbor got involved. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, her words failing her. Finally, she slumped back in the grass, her voice a defeated whisper. This is so unfair. Brad let out a long, weary sigh, his fight gone. Can I just go to jail now? He muttered, his voice heavy with resignation. The FBI agents finished their work, securing Brad's laptop in an evidence bag and leading him toward the door, his head bowed. Karen, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, scrambled to her feet, her clothes streaked with dirt and grass stains. She ran after them, her voice frantic. Wait, I'll get a lawyer. You can't take my son. The front door slammed shut behind them, cutting off her cries. The house fell silent, the air thick with the aftermath of chaos. Marcus let out a slow breath, his eyes scanning the scene. Glass shards from the shattered window sparkled on the floor. Karen's pile of angry complaint letters still sat on the counter, and for the first time in weeks, the house next door was blissfully quiet. He exhaled again, the weight of the ordeal lifting from his shoulders, and walked back to his own home, locking the door behind him with a satisfying click. For the first time since he'd moved into this crazy neighborhood, Marcus sank onto his couch, opened his laptop, and connected to his own Wi-Fi without a single worry about someone stealing it. The relief was almost palpable, like a cool breeze after a storm. The next morning, the neighborhood was abuzz with gossip, the kind that spreads faster than a viral video. Karen's house stood empty, its windows dark and lifeless. Brad was facing multiple felony charges, his future uncertain. And Karen? She'd been spotted loading a moving truck with that same furious scowl she'd worn every time she'd yelled at Marcus, her belongings piled high as she fled the scene of her downfall. By noon, she was gone, leaving nothing but whispers in her wake. As Marcus watered his plants in the front yard, the morning sun casting a warm glow over his quiet street, one of his other neighbors, an elderly man named George, strolled by with a knowing nod. So, George said, his eyes twinkling with amusement, I heard Karen had to move out. Big drama, huh? Marcus smirked, the memory of the chaos bringing a grin to his face. Yep, she's gone. George chuckled, shaking his head. Guess that means you won, didn't you? Marcus took a deep breath, savoring the crisp, peaceful air of a Karen-free neighborhood. Oh, he said, his voice brimming with satisfaction. I definitely won.